Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm Kyle. I'm here with Mike Syrylo. What's up?
How's it going, man? Long time no see.
Yeah, we just got back from PAX, which we were both at. So it has been a little bit over, I guess, 48 hours at this point, right? Ish.
Yes, it is. Well, 48 hours for me, and I think 24 for you. Right?
Well, for PAX, but 48 since we've seen each other.
Oh, yeah.
It
was technically Sunday.
It was technically Sunday. Yeah. For PAX schedule was, it was a necessity of how the convention is done. I'll say that. Basically, they don't open until like 10. And then there's always a big line to get in, and you got to go through security. And so the Legion tournament doesn't start until 11 o'clock on each day. And for scheduling reasons, it also had to be just like 2 days. And then also on Sunday, again, for scheduling reasons, I guess they weren't, like they couldn't do more than 2 rounds on Sunday.
Yeah, so PAX closes at 6 on Sunday. And
right.
It's a hard close at 6:01. You need to be out because they start setting up the next convention that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So you just literally cannot fit a third round in there.
Right. So the upshot of that is they had to do 4 rounds on Saturday, and that's 4 rounds starting at 11 o'clock.
And ending at like 11:25.
Yeah, with no dinner break or anything. So we got out on Saturday, and it was, I think, about midnight. And we're like, man, we're all very hungry. I will spare folks the details, but I will simply say that we got the late night Philadelphia down in Philly experience.
I did my best to warn everybody.
You did. The food that we ate was delicious. I will say that much.
The show was a little intense.
It was dinner and a show.
Yeah.
Not the type that you'd want to pay to see. Anyway, don't get me wrong, I love Philadelphia, but next time I will take your advice and not go out after midnight on a weekend. Okay. Well, so we're going to talk about PAX. This is going to be like the post-PAX episode. Unfortunately, Mike Barry could not be here. He's traveling currently. And he also went to PAX. But you and I are going to talk because we also both went to PAX and played lots of Legion. So we're going to talk about the results generally. People always want to hear about what did well. There's some broad topics coming out of that as well. And then we'll talk about our own personal experiences a little bit because I'm sure people want to hear about those too. So but before we get to any of that, real quick, we also got an actual reveal of a new card. They previewed a bunch of there's actually 2 news items here. The first is that the Geonocian release date got moved up to January 14th, 16th.
Right, I think it should be the 3rd Thursday or Friday of January.
Yeah, anyway, it's the middle of January.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, 19th, January 19th. I think. I'm like 70% sure that's what it is. Anyway, yes, it's awesome. I know that people were sad about the large release gap that was basically going to be between now and like right before Worlds. It looks like Geonocian's got moved up, narrows that gap a little bit. Who knows if other stuff got moved up? I think the next thing on the docket is Inquisitors.
Bring them on.
So, yeah. Hey, look, if you're going to tell me I can play 2 Force users for 200 points, that's what I'm going to do.
I'm not denying it.
I have a long history of force users and force user play. So if that's what I'm gonna do if that's a thing. But it's possible that they come out before Worlds. It was initially thought that they wouldn't. This is just us speculating based on the fact that Geonocians got moved up, that maybe other stuff could get moved up. Maybe it's just Geonocians. Who knows? But it seems like having Inquisitors before Worlds was definitely off the table, and it seems like it's not definitely off the table now. It's possibly on the table. So they haven't said anything one way or another about it, but Geonocians being moved up is encouraging regardless, because it's been a while since we had new stuff. So
yeah, and it's the third core. I'm excited. But we got at least one new card with the announcement, and
yes,
for some reason I was under the impression that the one pip that we got from Sunfac was new, but apparently we've had that for a while.
Yeah, they previewed that one at Mini Strav.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah, that's the basically one where it gives them a free jump move, which is great. It's interesting in how it's worded. I think it's the only card that I'm aware of that allows a unit to take like an actual action. In this case, it's a free action, but it's still an action outside of their activation. I guess maybe deploy the garrison, because that's a standby action. It's not just like gain a standby. So there's a handful of other cards like this, but most of like the free move cards basically just say like perform a move, not like, you know, perform the jump action or whatever. So that's a little bit unique. I think it's worded that way to prevent you being able to use it to move Geonocians that have objectives.
I think so. It keeps the way down trigger in effect.
Correct. Yeah, which is smart, I think. Otherwise, they're already very good at recover because they can double move and grab. But it would make them even sillier on recover because they could double move and grab on the last activation and then play this card and move away before the turn starts. So.
Triple move away.
Yeah, and it's a one pip.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that they'd be able to immediately then double move after that. So yeah. Anyway, that's a good card. I think we've talked about that already when it was previewed at Mini Strab. The thing that we got that's actually new is the other side of the force pike. And I was trying to figure out where this was from because it's not actually in the Scenes to Stats Sunfac article, unless it's like a tooltip or something. But the actual image, as far as I can tell, is not in there.
So I actually believe it's from an unboxing video from somebody who was able to get their package super, super early.
Okay. All right.
Which explains the finger covering the top part of the card.
Yeah. Yep, there it is, the finger over the card. Yeah, so basically it is an overrun weapon. It's black, white, white, and it's suppressive, like most overrun weapons. And it's got some unique language on it. It says when this unit performs an attack action, you may flip this card before the declare defender step. And then notably the other side, which is the melee side, which we already saw, but just to refresh people's memory, it's red, black, and when this unit performs a move action, you may flip this card before placing the movement tool, also suppressive. So that's a lot of words.
It is. It's pretty clear, fortunately, though. The timing is very well written.
It is, yeah.
And the TLDR is essentially anytime you want to move with them, you can trigger the overrun attack if you've not done it yet. And then as soon as you decide that you would like to perform your melee attack, you just flip it and do the same.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's the upshot. Is anytime you want to overrun, you can overrun. Anytime you want to melee, you can melee. And you can do those in the same turn if you want. I can foresee eventually people shortcutting this and just not flipping the card back and forth.
Yes, I was joking beforehand that I definitely was not going to sleeve this card.
Yeah.
Just taking it out to flip every time. Get old.
Right. I could see people eventually just being like, I do the overrun attack, I do the melee attack, because that's what this text allows you to do. It allows you to do either one of those whenever you want to do them. So yeah, I think that concept is cool. The dice on this overrun attack are terrible.
Yeah, it's an average of I think 1 hit per attack, and it's not even something you could mod with an aim, if I remember correctly.
No, not right, because it's not
right.
So Is that correct? Because it is still an attack. It's just not a ranged attack, and it's not a melee attack.
The few times that I've been overrun by Fluttercraft, and it was a Luminous turn with Yoda, the
They were
opponent
not.
said that they were not able to roll the dice.
Okay, well, they would
So
know, probably.
I would assume so. I've never played an overrun unit.
Overrun is one of those rules that is like obscure enough that most people don't actually know how it works.
I'm a
Okay.
little whelmed, just going off of the dice, but I do think that it's probably better that something like this is a little bit on the softer side. Having 6 overrun units could be slightly oppressive, especially when they get their free moves and if you combo it with a 1-pip. So I think it's a neat tool to have. It essentially gives them a suppressive melee attack, because if you overrun and then attack, the opposing unit will take 2 suppression.
Right.
So it might make it a little bit harder for them to get aim punched back, which could be useful. But I'm not really sure I want my Geonocians that close to the opponent to begin with a lot of the time.
They are very squishy. That said, the force pike is not that expensive. It's only 15 points. And the unit normally is what, 40?
Yes.
45. I think it's 45.
45.
So yeah, so 60 points. I mean, it's not as expensive as like the premium core units. It's pretty in line with like stormtroopers and rebel troopers.
Mhm.
And they're the same durability basically as rebel troopers. I could see doing this basically to just add an extra miniature, because
it's only 11 points for the extra body, so you may as
Right.
well add 4 points for the overrun.
the overrun and the slightly better melee profile, yeah.
Right.
Right. And don't get me wrong, 4 points can add up, especially if you've taken it like 5 or 6 times, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility. You can use these guys as like a first wave in like a Magna Guard list. You've got like 6 Geonocians with pikes and then 3 Magnas, and since they can triple move, the Geonocians like tie up and suppress your opponent's units while the Magna Guards
Right. It means that you're probably just getting popped by something like a Cassian Raiden on the way in with the Magna, and if you're only taking 1 wound a turn, you feel pretty good about that, so that when they hit the melee, you're still throwing your full dice complement.
Yeah, I could see a list like that working, especially against lists that don't have a lot of like opposing melee units.
Yes, or even lower activation lists like we're seeing with some of the GARs, because you can still push to a pretty decent act count here. So if you can even just wait out the first wave with the Geonocians and almost do like a mini last first of just to engage and at least tie down your opponent, make them force the withdrawal or go early with the Jedi, it seems like a net win.
Yeah, you definitely, I will say, the fact that they don't have charge, which means if they do the triple move thing, they can't soften up their target first. And the fact that they are so squishy, they don't have any defensive tech and they have white saves. There's a lot of just quote unquote like normal units in this game that throw black dice and melee. You charge a unit of stormtroopers or something, or rebel vets that have surging black dice. You get in melee with them, and then they throw 5 surging black dice back at you. Probably with an aim, because you haven't done, at minimum, you haven't done your melee attack, and there's a good chance you also, potentially on how far they weren't able to do your overrun attack. Like they could reasonably kill like 3 to 4 of your 6 Geonocians.
Yeah, before you even get to do anything.
On the punch, before you even get to do anything.
Let alone hitting something like an ARC Trooper that has 2 dice per attack.
Right, or pikes,
Yeah.
And if they have any specialized melee units like Wookiees or Ewoks, forget about it.
Yeah, you're just feeding them kill points.
Yeah. Now that said, their ranged attack at range 2, they get black white at range 2 per unit, which is the same as Black Sun. Now they don't get the free aims like Black Sun do, or the free surges. Black Sun can take the Vigo for the surges, but still, like black white, that's 12 dice, 6 black, 6 white at range 2 for a unit with any kind of extra body. That's a lot. So,
and with the heavier terrain we're seeing with the bigger buildings, death from above probably won't be that hard to get.
It depends on how they end up ruling. Because it's possible that you might need to be on top of like a height 2 terrain piece to actually get it to trigger, which will make it harder for sure. I'm gonna wait to see I don't think it's not going to make or break their value, but I'm going to wait to see how that plays out before I decide to order Geonocians.
I'm starting with one box just to have them on the shelf, and then
Yep.
based on a few other tweaks that I'm anticipating coming, we'll see what happens.
Yep. All right. Well, that was our non-PAX news item.
We would
Do
be
you have another
remiss.
one?
We would be remiss to mention. Technically, as written, overrun does not work.
Oh yeah.
I would be belligerently surprised if that's not updated by the time that they release, because they don't have a notched base.
Correct. Yeah. Right now, Overrun says that it has to be a notched base trooper.
Yeah.
To use Overrun, obviously they are not that. I'm sure that by the time they come out, either the CRB will be updated or there'll be some kind of forum ruling that says, we know this is what it says, they can still do it.
Yes.
Because it'd be a little bit silly for them to just literally not be able to use one side of that card.
Yes. I find it very unlikely.
Yeah. All right. Shall we discuss PAX?
Yeah.
So I think let's just open with like what did well. People always want to hear us run through the top 8 for these things. So I think we can do that fairly quickly. There's some broad themes here that are noticeable.
Yeah.
We're not going to go through every single list. I will write an article about it. So if you want to like look at all 8 of these in detail, or you're one of these players and you're like, hey, they didn't mention me, it just, it's going to be in the article. So we're not going to like read the standings on the podcast in detail. But so the winner was Sam McHenry, playing Anakin Padme, and more specifically, this version was an 8 activation Anakin Padme Pikes, where he basically cut an activation to like give everything situational awareness, including the clones.
Yep. And with the DC clones, all of his core had range 4 access.
Right. So he's got like the DC 15 captain clones, yes, with situational awareness, and then Pikes. Yeah. So it kind of takes the traditional like Anakin lists want to be at range 3 thing and adds a little bit of a, DC 15s aren't great at range 4, but they still work at range 4, which Z6s don't. And that pool is actually pretty good with the extra body in there. It's 5 black and 2 red
with critical 1.
With critical 1, which is that's a reliable pool, and they usually have aims to throw in there. So it's not as like, in your face wombo spiky as like a Z6, but it's reliable, and that critical is nice. So
yeah, the floor is much higher. You don't really see those I've got one hit and a surge rollouts that you can get with the Z6 at times.
Yeah. And I like the attack here specifically against like there's 2 things actually that it's good against. A lot of rebel lists that spam critical at long range, because there are a lot of rebel lists that do that with vets and things like that, but also against like Yoda lists. Yoda lists rely quite a bit on critical, from whether it's echo shots or fire supported Yoda or whatever. So being able to block crits in those particular matchups like really just takes that already durable Anakin Padme archetype and turns it up even more from 11 to 12. So
makes it very difficult to get through that first wave.
Right.
It's not as killy as some of the other Gar lists that we'll talk about. There's no saber throw on Anakin. There's no reliable fire support setups outside of command cards, but
right,
it's very, very consistent across the board, and very few of its attacks don't leave you rolling like 2 after cover, 3 after cover still, which against most lists will chip you down.
Oh sure, yeah, and it's just really difficult to kill anything.
Yeah,
so
it's hard to win when there's 8 activations on the other side.
Yeah, eight crazy durable activations. Yeah. Yeah, and notably, so Sam, Mike Berry and Josh Grimmer are basically the last 3 winners of major tournaments in the US. That would be PAX, Crucible, and Nova Open. They're all from the same store in DC. So whatever training regimen you guys got going on there, nice work.
It helps when you just play each other.
Sure. I mean, and the final at Nova was was Sam and Josh.
Mm-hmm.
So when you find like a good group of like consistently competitive players, then you can just play with those guys at your local. Obviously, that's like an ideal situation, and that's clearly what, you know, I know Mike has been trying to develop the local Legion scene at that store. So I'm sure a lot of this is like a direct result of him developing that competitive scene. But nice job, Game Castle in DC. So all right. So there's one thing that is immediately noticeable about these top 8.
It would be the faction symbols, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, there are only 2.
There are. We've got 5 Republic players and 3 Rebels.
Yep.
And notably, you could argue we have 7 different archetypes in the top 8 as well.
Yeah, I don't think you could argue that. I think that's basically true, and I think that's a positive. Just generally, I know there was I was personally one of the people that was lamenting the internal balance generally within the factions before this. I think at least with Rebels and Republic, PAX had demonstrated to me that maybe there's a little bit more diversity there than I originally thought. So do you want to run through just what you mean by like 7 different archetypes?
Sure. So I'll go with the Gar since that's what I brought. And obviously you're one of the Rebels.
Yep.
So obviously with Sam, we had the Anakin Padme Pikes. Our third with Mike Berry with Dashes, we had the Yoda with Cody. We also had another Yoda at 6th with John Grizz. 7th place with Pat Balco. We had an Anakin without Padme, but it was Anakin 5's Clone Commander full arcs. And then I'll say the dark horse star of the tournament, Richard Lavery, had the Wookiee Battle Force with no Force user and just a whole lot of fur. So we weren't seeing just the Yoda Padme list win or just the Anakin Padme list win. We saw 4 very different styles of lists all come together to destroy quite a few units along the way and post a pretty good record. You know, all of these lists have 2,200 plus points destroyed across their games, so they weren't just eking out victories.
Yeah, except Sam, ironically.
Yes.
But yeah, and he said, you know, that's part of his strategy too. Basically, is he'd kill a unit and then be like, "All right, you know, what are you gonna do?"
Now you've got to kill me, and that's just not going to happen.
Right. So yeah, I mean, this is for even the Anakin lists, as you noted, were very different. Anakin list, Anakin Padme Pikes plays very different than like an Anakin clone gun line. So,
and I guess I should have mentioned the Anakin Padme Pikes is barrier Anakin, and then the clones is saber throw Anakin. So one is very much the I'm going to get in your face. I have 5s, I have clone commander, and I'm triggering fire supports frequently.
Right. And even like Mike's Yoda list, he switched it up a little bit this time and dropped an arc unit for Cody, which is also different than like the quote unquote traditional. We say traditional, it's only been a thing for like a month really, but Yoda gun line. So, and he said basically that it was a lot better than he expected. I played against him. I can talk about it. He was my only loss. I can talk about our game when we get to that, and I can contest that Cody was better than I expected him to be, because he's basically like Bosk, right? He's got a range 4 attack. Unlike Bosk, he only has 4 dice, but he surges crit. And also, unlike Bosk, he has access typically to a silly amount of aim tokens.
Every turn.
Every turn.
Not just one.
Not just on lying in wait.
Yeah.
So you can kind of just like charge him up with aims and fish for crits with like 4 or 5 aims. And he's also got lethal. So you're probably going to get like 3 to 4 aim for 3 to 4 crits, even if you're just shooting with Cody. And then of course, if you can manage to like fire support him with a Z6 or something like that, that entire pool has surge crit.
Right.
So, and fire supporting something with, you know, that's one thing Yoda lists do really well, is because of guidance, you can put your phase 1s in unexpected spots to do fire supports that your opponent thought they were safe from. So
yeah, Cody is uniquely good as well in like aggressive negotiations, because you can do what you're just mentioning there. If you just authoritative him the order, you have the phase 1 move up with the speed 1, Cody takes an aim. Now it's like, all right, I've already got at least 1 aim on the fire support shot, and you've done nothing else. It's
Yeah,
it's a pretty deadly combination.
Yeah, probably at least 2, because you can get free tokens with aggressive negotiations.
Right.
If you don't take the move, if what you need is
Right.
already in position. So
and it's on 2-pip priority, so it's not exactly a slow card.
right.
Yeah.
He did say that he would have rather had the arcs in his loss, which was against Sam, because Sam's list was so well constructed to deal with crits.
That makes sense.
So, maybe the conclusion there is to just not take Cody, because the Yoda gun line is already like more than enough to deal with the other stuff, typically. If depending on how you play it, obviously. But it's one of those things where it seems like it kind of makes you win more in matchups that you already could sort of handle, and then replacing the arc makes you struggle a little bit in those situations where, like, you need to kill stuff that has situational awareness or some other way to deny crits.
It doesn't really strike me as a mirror cracker.
Right.
Against another well-tuned Gar list, they'll probably have a way to deal with it.
Yeah, I can see it being good against like other Yoda gun lines that also don't typically take situational awareness, because you're spamming those crits at longer-ish range. You've got the lethal for the Pierce. So I could actually see it being specifically good in like the Yoda mirror. But if you're facing an Anakin Pikes that spams situational like Sam was, or if you're facing like a Pike Shadow Collective gunline, obviously that has a ton of situational awareness, I could also see that being an issue. So.
Yeah, agreed.
And then the Rebels. I'll talk about the Rebels because I was one of them, and I, I guess I brought something that was a little unorthodox in that I brought Han, which actually 2 of the top 8 lists had Han because one of them was Bright Tree Village. But yeah, I mean, look, I still had Cassian, I still had Vets, so it's not like I was like really breaking the mold here. But basically, it's a Cassian Han gun line with Chewie, and I also took some full commandos, which I can talk about when I get to my experience. But that was, I think, my favorite part of this list. The other 2 Rebels were completely different. You had Ryan Slawowski with Echo Base. And it was a Tauntaun Echo Base, not your typical like FD. Obviously you still have and play hold at any cost because it's still great on the Vets, but it's not like a gunline Echo Base. It's a in your face Tauntaun Echo Base.
Right. So it was 3 Tauns, 1 FD. So it still retains a little bit of the range poke with the Vets with the FDs, but you still have the triple Tauns that we saw terrorize Legion a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And transponders now.
Yeah, and mechanically, they're not really that much different than they used to be. No. They're just a little more expensive, but Echo Base has a lot of tools to, I think, make them great again. So, and I think Ryan proved that. So, nice job, Ryan, bringing Tauntauns again for the first time and succeeding with Tauntauns for the first time in like 3 years. And then the other Rebel was Chris Lewis, who brought the 14 activation Bright Tree Village list. And I played him in my last game, so I can talk a little bit more about this too when we get to our games. But that's a lot of Ewoks. I'm
curious to hear your thoughts, because Chris and I played in the 2B 3-0 at our last store championship game, and he was also playing this 14 act stuff. And I'm curious to hear how your experience relates to mine from Rebels to a clone perspective. Because
okay.
It definitely is a unique style of Legion.
Yes. It is. It's very different than most games that you would play. I also played against a Wookiee spam list, and it had a similar feel to it. But I'll talk about those when I get to my games.
Can I plug my own cast if I'm part of the network now?
Please, yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, we always whenever we have people on, we like for them to plug stuff. So please.
And if you're interested to hear more about Chris's Ewoks and Richard's I'm blanking on the name, Kashyyyk Defender Battle Force. Yep. Both Chris and Rich will actually be on Legion 99 with us on this Saturday, so we'll drop it next week. So we're going to talk to them about their experience with 2 very differently constructed melee SKUs and kind of how they went about their tournaments. So
2 very furry melee SKUs.
2 very furry melee SKUs, with a whole lot of activations and wounds across the 2 of them. But
yeah, and I understand they actually played each other.
They did.
So I think Richard basically knocked Chris out, as far as I understand.
That's correct.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of tracks when you think about like a bunch of Battle Shield Wookiees facing off against a bunch of Ewok skirmishers.
Yeah, when they're
It-
throwing like the same amount of dice, but the Wookiees have more consistent dice and they have more wounds. I would think they would win there.
and the
But
armor one.
and armor one, yeah.
yeah.
But we'll let them talk about it and
Right.
hopefully get some good insights from it.
Yeah. Obviously, the Ewoks I think have more shenanigans. You
They
know,
do.
the Wookiee list is very. The Wookiee list is very just punch you in the face.
And he did quite well with 3362 kill points across his games. I mean, that's over 550 a game
That's a silly number.
over 6 games.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've ever seen a number like that over 6 games, actually.
I don't think I have.
Yeah.
Yours wasn't too far behind, but
Mine was pretty high.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, I was at 2753, which that was a lot higher than I expected, which I can talk about. Yeah. All right. So do you have any further thoughts on, well, okay.
Not on the top 8, not on the
Yeah.
top 8 specifically, but we were talking a little bit about potential faction balance, and
Yep.
I'm not really sure that showed up across the rest of the factions. We had more battle forces present in the top 8 than any other faction represented in the top 25.
Yeah, there were 2 Empire in the top 20 and 2 droids.
2 Empire in the top 22. Yes.
Top 22. Okay.
Next Empire was 23rd. Now they were 9th and 13th, so very respectable placings. I know Evan was running the Tempest Force, and I think Matt Hall was as well. There's actually a lot of Tempest Force Empire at this event.
Yep.
And then outside of 10th place CIS placing, the next was 25th. So now there weren't a lot of CIS. I believe there were only 7 or 9
there weren't
signups. So it's not totally unexpected, but it's not great. And it did take the experimental droid battle force to make it to the top 10. So it's not even vanilla CIS.
Yeah, and I think there is something to that battle force, but it's not great. Somebody on the Discord went through manually and did like the win-loss numbers. We will eventually, there should be a way to not have to do this manually eventually, but somebody like combed through Game Uplink and looked for this. So this notably does not exclude mirror matches. Typically when you do faction win rates, you want to like cut out the mirror matches because those just add noise to the data, right? If you have a Empire player playing against another Empire player, that's not going to tell you anything about the faction balance, right?
It's going to bring everything closer to 500.
Correct. Yeah, it brings that win rate closer to 50% by including those mirrors. So take these for what you will, but we had Republic. First of all, there were, I think, almost half the field was Republic.
Yeah, so about 44% of the field was Republic.
Yeah, so which is interesting because if that's a lot of mirrors, this number is even crazier.
I was going to let you say it before I brought up the little asterisk that we have next to it.
Yeah. So you know what? I'm going to save that one for last.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to start from the bottom and work up then?
Yeah, let's start from the bottom. And so bottom actually would be Empire, 26 and 40. That is not a good win rate.
No.
And that gets
Empire
worse
was
probably when you...
second highest represented faction. So there's a decent chance that there are some mirrors included in there.
Yeah, and I think I said on our PAX predictions episode that I thought Empire was going to do poorly. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take that to the bank and say I told you so, because when Republic is good, and more specifically when arcs are good, Empire has problems.
Yes.
And I think that bore out in this tournament. Another thing too is that when people are teching to deal with clones by doing things like bring in a lot of Pierce, that also works against Empire. Yeah. So, but Empire doesn't have the dodge access that clones do.
Right. And there were a few people that also teched heavy armor against the Yoda lists, and a lot of the Empire lists that showed up didn't have reliable sources of impact as well, and Boba Fett's not as prevalent, so they even struggled into some of the armor lists as well.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a double whammy.
Yeah, it's not a good storm.
No, and well, I didn't see how many, like, you know, quote unquote conventional, like, obviously bounty hunters are still good. Bosk seems like he should be good into into clones. So does Iden. I didn't test that out myself, but so I don't know how many people were actually running that versus trying to do like, break the mold with Empire. I don't know, but it's not a good number.
No.
We'll see. This is kind of new. Obviously, Empire's been doing great for most of the year with the current balance change situation. So we'll see if this is like a blip or if this continues to be a trend. But
Sure. Coming up next, we actually had CIS. Like I said, there were not a lot of players there. They actually only ended up 11 and 15.
yeah. These other three are all pretty close to 500, right? Droids
Right.
11, 15, Rebels 33, 35, and Mercs 16 and 12. So
the Rebel one actually interests me quite a bit because we had 3 in the top 8. So we have at least 15 wins represented amongst those 3.
Yep.
And that's half your wins. So
that's an interesting point.
So if you go off of those numbers there, and there's a few Rebels that were just outside of the top 8 as well. We had a 15th placing. But then after you hit 15, the next Rebel was 33. So it appears that the Rebels either did very, very well or not so hot. There wasn't a whole lot of middle of the pack Rebel play.
Yeah, so right. So if those top 3 Rebels were 5 and 1, that means the rest of the field basically was 15 and 30, roughly, right? Yeah. Which is not good.
After 15th, it drops to 27, 33, and then into the 40s.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I didn't think about it that way. Like, it's easy to look at that number and be like, Rebels are fine. They're close to 500. But when three players are accounting for like half those wins, that's not as good.
But as we said, 3 different archetypes. So it's very possible that you just need to be playing a certain style. And there might be certain styles that work, but I'm not sure you can just show up with any Rebel list and have a good time. You have to put a little bit more work into it.
That's definitely true. Okay, so Republic.
Well, we did have Shadow Collective.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Shadow Collective 16 and 12.
Solid.
Yeah, it's good. There weren't that many. I played against the Black Sun list, which I'll talk about. But yeah, I mean, the Shadow Collective is good. Pikes are good. Black Sun are good, generally. So
Bosk is good.
Yeah.
And Gar is good.
Yeah, 75 and 54 is the Gar number. I don't know how many of those are mirrors, but all the mirrors would do is bring it even further up.
I played 3 of them in 4 games, so I know there were a lot.
Yeah. So that's effectively like a 66% win rate or something close to it. It's probably closer to 70 or 75% once you remove mirrors. If somebody that is listening to this wants to like go through the matches and remove the mirrors and give us updated numbers, we'd love that. But I know that's a lot of work. So
let's see how slow my work day is tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, Republic's good.
Yeah.
We've talked about this on the cast. They've had some, I think at the time that they were made, they've had some necessary buffs. But a lot of the rules updates have kind of like indirectly helped them almost exclusively. The pass mechanic, the cover rules, simply because when you increase the amount of cover, it makes things that bypass defensive tech, which generally have small dice pools, and things that have like Pierce, which is something that would bypass defensive tech. Those tend to have small dice pools, Pierce and high velocity weapons. So that bounces off the cover. It makes defensive tech better, right? Because, so you have people always ask like, well, why are red saves better when everyone has cover? Wouldn't that make white saves better? It's not just the red saves. It's the dodge spam and the things like barrier. Like say you have, between barrier and let's say you just have like 3 dodges, which is not that many dodges, really.
It's not that hard to make 3 dodges.
Right. That's like 5 points of negating hits, right? If you're shooting. Yeah. So if you're shooting into no cover, the average like core unit with a heavy dice pool is like roughly 4 hits, right? So 1 shot into cover and you've basically like cleared their defensive tech for the turn, right? But if you're shooting into cover, that first shot, cover takes off 2, and then you've only got 2 hits left. You only clear like 2 of the 5 or 6 bits of defensive tech. Then the second shot, you clear 2 more, say, but then they still got 1, maybe 2 left. So it takes you like 2 to 3 shots to clear that defensive tech. And during that time, they're building up more of it, recovering barrier, taking more dodges, whatever.
You're also rolling at a 66% save rate, so that anything that does actually make its way through is even unlikely to do a wound if you don't have Pierce.
Right. So whereas against white saves, if you can actually clear hits past the cover, you're banking those as wounds. So that's a long way of saying like cover makes everything more durable, which makes durable things more durable.
Yeah.
So anyway, the pass rule, the cover rules, I think those are the biggest 2. There are other minor things like the choke nerf,
the deflect nerf,
because
none of the guard Jedi are hit by it.
Right. It's just been like a lot of small things that add up over time. So yeah, interesting. Like, I don't want to say collateral, but I feel like none of those changes were intended to buff Gar, but obviously they have. So anyway, okay. Do you want to talk about our own personal experiences?
Yeah, so I can start first because I ended up actually just dropping after day 1. Just wanted to go home.
Yep.
Played my games. So I played a Yoda Padme list. I ended up going with the Clone Commander version. So I had Yoda with Yoda, Clone Commander, Naked Padme, and then the standard core of RPS Z6 Phase 2 Mortar. And then I made the tweaks in going with a full arc Echo and a full arc DC 15. And instead of the strike, I had the Clone Commander.
Okay.
My big change is on Yoda, I had barrier push and battle meditation. So I skewed going for force guidance to get better flexibility for the 2-pip. Because I had bolster 2 on the Clone Commander, I still have the same number of surges every turn. The timing is just different. The timing is actively worse. It required a lot more setup and a lot more play to make sure that it does work. But I consider battle meditation to be a mirror cracker, in that it gives me, every time that I play the 2-pip, 3 full arc shots with aim support every turn, and one of them is guaranteed to be fire supported. And there's really not a lot of lists that can hold up to that. It did very well at getting into the other Yoda mirrors, except for my first opponent, who was playing double Saber Tank, double Secret Mission, Dodge Castle. Saber Tank is outmaneuver and is line of sight blocking. So he played a very strong. Let me start from the beginning. So he played that list. It's got 2 portable scanners. It's got perfect order control in the tanks because it does have a comms relay, a Clone Commander, and then Padme. So there's always a way to get both of them in order, no matter what command card was played. And it also had R2 to pull off some wounds when you finally do get it through to the tank. It also had a small bid, which meant I was playing its deck. And none of its objectives were good for me. So it has a lot of very mobile objectives, forces you to move, wide deployments, the typical secret mission crap. So we ended up playing Payload, which I think ended up being a mistake. I ended up losing this game 5-3 on Payload. Neither of us lost an activation. And that was not because we didn't shoot at each other. So we both rolled about 75% on our saves, which was ridiculous, but not uncommon. And I had the choice between Bombing Run or Payload when the flip came up. And I didn't want to play Bombing Run against the tanks in R2. And I think this ended up being a mistake. So I chose Payload and chose to try to do a bit of a wider deployment so that I could try to catch something from behind the tanks, and then kind of just move away as they had to chase me. But I forgot until halfway through the first turn, the tanks were line of sight blocking. And I wasn't able to kill either tank. I got both of them down to about 4 wounds remaining, but I just couldn't crack the dodges with Padme. And what I should have done in hindsight, and what I talked to Josh Grimmer about, who ended up playing him later, is we needed to essentially turn it into a skirmish and just make the tanks come to us, keep it in a 3x3, and just basically say that I'm going to save as well as you are, but I can get into your side. I can get Yoda close. We can use the lightsaber. And I should have done that on Payload instead. And unfortunately, I didn't. No one died and we moved on. So I don't think I'm going to fall for that again. But it was a good test. I was rewarded for the loss with playing Josh round 2, actually. Um, so I got to play nearly an exact mirror.
Uh-huh.
Josh was also playing the full Arc Echo Clone Commander with the same core setup.
Okay.
The only difference between our list was he had Guidance and I had Battle Meditation. And we had the new tiebreaker rule come up. I shouldn't say new. We had the house-made PAX tiebreaker rule come up.
Okay.
So we we're both at 800 points.
Uh-huh.
So when we got to the table, we rolled off for red and blue, and then we rolled off to see who would win the tie. I got red player and I got ties win.
Okay.
So I picked my board edge, and both of us were aware of the fact that if nothing died, I won the game. So I wasn't a huge fan of this. I appreciate that everyone was made aware before the tournament started of this is how it's going.
Okay.
So assuming you're a player who reads the packet, pays attention to the news, you knew what was happening. So I think that was great. There was no confusion. I do wish that we just did a random roll off at the end of the game for ties, or just let it be a tie, because it really changed how we went about turn 0 and how we picked the battle cards. When the cards flipped over, both of us knew who was winning, and we saw in the middle we had VAPs and we had hostage exchange on 2 and 3, and we flat out said to each other, we're trying to interact this game, right? And we said yes. So we ended up playing key positions instead. So that was in the first slot. So neither of us banned an objective, and both of us just worked on deployments and conditions because we didn't want to let that rule essentially determine our game.
Okay.
So it didn't feel great to artificially change how we do turn 0 in the battle card selection. I would like to just kind of do a roll off at the end and just make it randomness. If one of you wants to let it get to the point that a die roll decides your game, then so be it. But I am glad that there was clarification beforehand. I think that is the best way to go about it. But anyway, into our game.
Well, hang on. I want to talk about that real quick because I feel like it's worth discussing that. Sure. Just as a concept. I know we've talked about draws on this podcast a lot in the past. I think there's sort of broad agreement that the concept of a draw is problematic for a variety of reasons. It's awkward for tournament structure, especially ones where there's eliminations. But also for Swiss, because if you go X and O and 1, that suddenly makes pairings weird, and there's a lot of Swiss tournaments where it's basically going to be like a loss,
right? Because
someone's going to go 6 and 0,
right? Because you need the X and O to essentially be the winner,
right?
The X, O, and
right.
Y.
So it's just awkward for that. It also creates this awkward like in-game dynamic where, at least in my experience, instead of having both players like wanting to go at each other because neither of them want to draw, you get like both players kind of afraid to do anything because neither of them want to have a unit eliminated.
Yeah.
So instead of like, I know there was discussion when this first came out where it's like, oh well, both players will be the attacker, this will be fine, and in my experience the way it plays out is both players mentally sort of end up like you get like 2 defenders. So that I think the draw concept is problematic. I think that this was specifically designed to address the second part of that, where like there's the role confusion essentially. I'm not sure that I don't think that this is the solution. I'm not sure what the solution is. And I mean, ideally, I guess you tie it to player color again, so that if you want to bid for the tiebreak, and I'm not saying you make it blue, maybe you make it red, but if you tie it to player color, you at least give somebody a choice over who gets the tiebreak, and then you don't have this weird like what happens if both players are at 800 kind of a thing. So anyway, it's awkward. I don't think that what happened at PAX was the solution. I understand why it could be problematic in its own way. But it does seem like there's some consensus that there needs to be some way to sort out how to resolve draws. So
yeah, especially because if you look at the lists that are taking 800 points, it's a lot of gunline style lists, and these are the defensive style. I'm going to poke, I'm going to prod, I'm waiting for someone to make an error, I'm waiting for someone to step forward, and if no one ever does it, the likelihood of 2 Republic gunlines drawing are a lot higher than 2 we'll say Sheik defenders at 800 drawing that need to get close to each other. And
Right.
if this is the meta that a lot of the rule changes over time have kind of formed into create, it's a situation that is happening often and needs to have an answer for.
Yeah, and I think their objective with this was to increase interaction, and if that's what they're going for, I'm not sure that that's what's happened.
Agreed.
So anyway, continue. I just wanted to hit that real quick. I didn't have any personal experience with that at PAX because I had a 798 list, so it never came up for me. But I could see if you're running an 800 point list, how it would be awkward.
This is actually my only 800 point mirror. The other ones all had bids, so it only came up this one time, which is why I think it felt significantly different than the others.
Okay.
So like I said, not a huge fan. I do appreciate the clarification, but I didn't like it.
Yep.
I did like how the game went.
Okay.
And ended up actually ending on like turn 4, because I was able to do said 3 full arc shot and a fire support and essentially crack down his Echo squad and half the Z6 when none of mine took wounds. And when we're playing key positions and he's got to walk across the middle to get, or I'm sorry, walk across an open spot to get to the middle. And now the biggest heavy hitter is gone. And I can then churn into Luminous right after doing this again. Barring crazy variants, it just doesn't go very well. We positioned pretty close. It was major offensive, so I deployed in my little 3x3 box. Josh took a little bit more of the panhandle, so we were a little close together, but he was able to take advantage of some good terrain pieces down there. And then clone gun lines hit each other, and I was just able to shoot with more Pierce because of the battle meditation. So it worked out rather nicely. One of the downsides to that card is that when you do the orders on both arcs, Yoda's in the bag. But with the clone commander, you have 2 commanders, 1 operative, 2 core. So it's really not that bad, and you don't have to give the order to the arc. You can still do Yoda.
Right.
But it's super easy to play Luminous, turn 2, set up your army as you want it, drop the 2-pip. There is no try to do the double arc turn 3 as it's already preset. And then you get Luminous back anyway, and then you just play it again turn 3. So even if you need to hang an arc out, or if Yoda is a little bit off plan, he's not attacking next turn anyway. And all of a sudden you have your token generation right back up. So it trades a little bit of instability on the turn to just present an overwhelming shot. And then game 3, I was rewarded with another Yoda mirror. This was more of the traditional one. So it was the Yoda Padme with the 2 full arc, 1 Echo Strike. I played Tyler from the Florida Man gang.
Okay.
Wonderful player. We've been at the last 6 tournaments together and finally got to play. He had a little twist though. Instead of the phase 2 mortar, he actually had Boil, and he had targeting scopes on the arcs.
Okay.
So it didn't really come into play all that much in our game, because with clone level dice pools, pulling 1 away doesn't do a whole lot when it's either I'm rolling 4 or I'm rolling 5.
Yep.
So I think it probably would have been good against some of the rebel lists, but it didn't really come into play here. We played key positions again, advanced positions and War Weary, and I kind of went a little cold in the middle of the game. I left him on 4 single unit leaders that I just could not finish off, and he was able to take the middle point 3-1 at the end. It's kind of the exact same format. We set up on those diagonals. We just traded range 4 barbs turns 1 through 3. Turn 4, we engaged. We rolled some dice. I couldn't kill what I needed to kill. He couldn't kill what he needed to until the very end, and unfortunately, we just kind of diced off for the end. Wasn't a whole lot that really happened there. Battle meditation was great. Unfortunately, the arcs whiffed, and I couldn't kill a unit on that turn. They rolled 8 paint total across 3 attacks with aim support, so it was a little rough. But I just couldn't shoot through the unit leaders. Tyler ended up taking it there. The Echo Strike was nice for him. He could kind of sit back at the home KP and just pop the long range lethal shots. So I really had to waste barrier on Echo quite a bit. So I really missed him in that aspect of the mirror. But the order control with the clone commander and the direct let me get some really good shots to chew down his RPS squad and things of that nature. I do think that I'm going to stick with what I have for the Yoda one, stick with some battle meditation for a while. I think I played pretty poorly in game 1. I think I could have played better in 3 and just taken advantage of the positioning better. But I really do think it's better in the mirror. Because when I got to game 4 and played my first non-Gar list, I played a Shadow Collective list on Long March, Recover, and by the end of turn 4, there was only 2 units left on the table, and I had all of mine in the center on the center KP and had 3 boxes, so it was very difficult to crack into. And the Clone Commander let me get fire supports on the RPSs. But anyways, I'm sorry. Game 4, I did it was played against some Shadow Collective. It was a 2 times Mando, double Black Sun, double Pike, Capo, Medic Bus, and Gar Saxon. I had a 7-point bid. Its battle deck was really strong. It's all mobile objectives, long objectives.
Yep.
And I ended up trying to force him down to recover the supplies and hope that I could guidance and pick up some boxes. It was in the 4th slot, so it was pretty easy to get to, fortunately. He didn't want to play key positions, so he bumped it down right away. It was nice.
Yep. I wouldn't want to play key positions against the Yoda gun line either.
No, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, cool. I've got 3 bands here.
Yep.
So we set up for some Long March, and I essentially just scouted the arcs forward turn 1 and decided to just drop Luminous off the bat and try to engage the middle box as quickly as possible. So I ended up going Luminous, There's No Try into Luminous. And it's not really enough dice on the Shadow Collective side to hold up against that. But I was able to get 2 back-to-back Echo RPS fire supports off with the Clone Commander. The bus died relatively quickly to that. And then over the next 2 turns, I just directed the Mortar, so I suppressed his other stuff when it was fire supporting Echo yet again. And then anything that was left couldn't really move. And it was essentially just like a dice gun line. Something hit W, Yoda hit shoot, and just didn't go very well. I was surprised that Gar Saxon wasn't as good into the Yoda list as I thought, because he does have long shot. He's got the range 1 to 4 rifle. He's got the high velocity. It's got some pierce to it. But there wasn't enough ways to get aims on him.
Yeah.
Without the tactician on the bus, because it's not super great, and without a lot of command cards that give him aims, he couldn't really generate the crit rolls that he needed to on the rerolls, because he had to keep them away. So it was the range 5 long shot, and then it's like, oh, 1 crit. And I was like, okay, barrier, or 2 crits, and you barrier 1 and you just lose the other. So I was a little let down there. I think it was a little unfortunate that was the matchup. But that was my final game. Ended up going home afterwards. It's a long day and night Saturday, and I wanted to get home to my actual bed because I only live like 45 minutes from the city. Okay. So I learned what I needed to. I think I'm going to stick with this list for a while. It's definitely what I'm planning to play for Worlds. I don't really have another event until Golden Sprue in the end of January up in Schenectady. So try to get some store tournaments in the meantime, but I want to refine this a little bit more. I'm not sure that I'm going to switch to the Cody option, though. Battle meditation on Cody and a full Echo sounds pretty nice.
It does.
The redundancy of the 2 full arcs is, I think, too good with the setup that I have. I lean a little less more into the dodge castle and more into the I'm just going to outshoot you with the battle med and Echo in the full arc, and I think I'm going to keep it that way. Play some style more.
Yeah, and like you said, at this point you're kind of tweaking for the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that you and Mike both went into this tournament with that in mind to experiment with that, I think is sort of telling as far as the overall strength level of the list, right? Because once you have a list and you're basically like, my primary objective now is to figure out how I can win the mirror better. That should tell you something about how good it is, right?
I have not played as much as Mike recently, but I have not yet lost to a non-Gar opponent with this list. So I'm fairly confident that any of the tweaks that it has, I'm still pretty good against the other factions. It's more of tweaking so that I can beat myself and beat the Anakin. Because it's got enough dice for Ewoks. I'm pretty sure it does for Wookiees. I haven't run into the 7 of them yet, but we shall see. It was 3-0 at the last store championship, so I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to give it a try in between now and Worlds just for science.
Yeah, you're gonna have fun.
That's what everybody tells me. It's back in the day when I played Palpatine. Palpatine like totally spoke to me. I think the meta's moved on from him a little bit, which is unfortunate. But Yoda's kind of like, it's a very similar concept, right?
It is.
So I think that I would love it. I'll have to, we got a few months, so I'll have to try it. We'll see. I did love what I actually took to PAX. I'm not sure it's better than the Yoda list, and in fact, Mike playing Yoda is the one that I lost to. That was my one loss. I'll talk about that game. I'll save that for last, probably. Just generally, the list. Basically, it was Cassian K2, Han Chewie, so double teamwork. I'm sure there's a list name idea in there somewhere. After I submitted, I thought of teamwork makes the dream work. But I ended up going, I hope I can still play Rebels, because I have not played a single game, tournament or otherwise, with Rebels since 2021. So it's been 2 years since I played any one game with Rebels. So yeah, but I think I did well enough to at least answer that question. But it was the Han, Cassian, Chewie, K2, two vets with the CM93, just one MK2, because I also had a unit of Ewok skirmishers. The reason that the Ewok skirmishers are in there is for reckless diversion. Basically, you stick one Ewok model out there and you throw the rest of them behind line of sight. You play reckless diversion on them, assuming you position them correctly, which I did not in my game against Mike. Your opponent has to shoot them, and the most they can do, even if they've got a 20 dice fire support, is kill one Ewok model at a time because of the casualty removal rules. And that Ewok model that's out there can still stay out there the whole time. You don't have to pick them up like you used to have to. So, yeah, basically they're good for 5. You don't want them to kill the entire unit, so you stick the non-unit leader out there. But they're good for basically like in theory, the first 5 shots of the turn and just eating half a turn's worth of shots.
That's wild.
Yeah, I never I'm unclear if I want to commit to that gimmick. I never really set up like the perfect scenario with that, just based on like where the line of sight blockers were. It was harder to set up than I thought it would be. Let's put it that way. I did use reckless diversion in every game, and it was good in every game in like the traditional way it's good, where your opponent just has to target the stuff that they don't want to. And that was usually the Ewoks, right? Because it's a cheap unit with 6 wounds and low profile. So even if you're not doing the 1 wound gimmick, it's still like it's something that's not threatening, or at least not threatening on the turn that you play that card. It's something that's hard to damage, and it's something that has a lot of wounds. So it's still like an ideal reckless diversion target. So I used it in a more traditional way to just, make my opponent shoot something that they didn't want to shoot. And also reckless diversion is great for forcing split fire, because there are a lot of like, even if you just look at the core heavies, right? There are a lot of core that are range 3 and they have a heavy that's range 4. Well, if you position it correctly and you've got like the stuff that they would want to shoot in range 3 and your Ewoks or whatever else is a little behind them at range 4, then they're basically forced to split fire. They throw like the normal guys range 3 guns at your front line, and they have to throw the heavy weapon by itself at the Ewoks and then not do really any meaningful damage to either thing. So that's like the quote unquote traditional way to use reckless diversion, and that's mostly what I did with it. So I think it'd probably work almost as well with a unit of rebel troopers, and then I could spend the 5 points that I spent on Underworld Connections with Han on improvised orders instead, which I think would have been more generally helpful.
Yeah, you have a lot of different ranks in your pool.
Yeah, it's a little awkward, and there's also turns where I infiltrated Cassian every time so that I was always guaranteed to be able to pull K2 before Cassian, so because they were both operative tokens, just in case, a lot of times you do like the K2 charge up Cassian with aims to guarantee 2 crits thing. So Han was only ever the single commander token, and on turns where you don't give him an order, which is, for Cassian's command card turns, it's not ideal to have him in the bag, because you generally want him to go last or near the last part of the turn, so he can do like a last steady shot. So it'd be nice to be able to throw that back. I also had so in addition to all that, I also had 2 full commandos and then a commando strike team. The commandos were great. Full commandos, it's 76 points for that. I mean, their dice pool is not that much different from full arcs.
It's a white die instead of a red, essentially.
Right, but they surge to hit, and they pierce natively, so they don't have to spend a name on lethal. Now, obviously, you can't fire support them unless somehow you get an order to your MK2. But you can't like do wombo fire supports with them, and you can't charge them up with aims. But they're also like 20 points cheaper than arcs. So, for 74 points, a dice pool that is basically arcs at range 3, I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I was very pleasantly surprised. The way that the tables were set up, I think, really helped me out. There was a lot of stuff, and this is credit to Nick. There was a lot of stuff that was just like obviously supposed to be light area terrain. Like pallet boxes, forests, bushes, stuff like that. And these were all in like relevant parts of the table. So I had a lot of games where I was just shooting through light cover, and the commandos are great in that situation with their sharpshooter one. So like you asked how my game against the Ewoks went. I guess I can make a broad theme of this. I don't want to talk about all 6 of my games, but basically I did really well against the list that I didn't expect to do well against. That being like wound spam / melee skews, because the Cassian Han list there's no dedicated melee units. The skirmishers, the naked skirmishers don't really count. And at least I thought when I built this list, I'm like, I'm going to design this to kind of poke with reliable pierce and critical, but in small quantities at long range to deal with clones, basically. But if that's what the list is good at, then you're going to have trouble against like Wookiee or Ewok spam, because while you're going to be able to reliably pick up, individual models from a distance, when you've got to do 90 wounds over the course of a game, like you're going to have trouble. It turns out, at least the answer to that question was that the list just has a lot more firepower than I suspected. Part of that is just how reliable all the shots are. Even though Cassian is you're doing the 2 crit thing at unlimited range per turn, like that adds up. But then you're not only doing that with Cassian, you're doing it with Chewie, you're doing it with, if Han can get into the right position, he's picking up 2 to 4 models a turn. If they get close enough, K2 can do that. You've got your sniper strike, and then the vets and the commandos, when they're at full strength, which you can keep them that way for quite a while because of Chewie with Protector, like they slap really hard. Yeah. There were a lot of times where I was just free to sit there and aim with a full vet or commando unit. And I was, with the commandos, I was getting 4 or 5, sometimes 6 hits. With the vets, I was getting like 6 or 7 hits, and just picking up chunks of entire units at a time with the commandos and the vets. Particularly like in that Ewok matchup, if you can shoot through light cover with sharpshooter 1, that effectively turns off low profile, because you have to have cover after sharpshooter for low profile to trigger. So if you can shoot Wookiees in light cover with sharpshooter 1, it doesn't work at all. And there were like several shots where I picked up 5 Ewoks just in one chunk with the full commando squad.
That's kind of how I found that game works. Is you're essentially just aim shooting until they get to range 2.5.
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of do your timings, because you can't aim because you need to shoot and step back or shoot and step to the side and make it a little more difficult. Yeah. But I was surprised how often I could like fire support turn 1, 2 and not be worried about them getting in or shooting me, because they just can't.
Yeah, and suppression's a big part of that too. I actually faced Bright 2 Village twice, and in both games, I found that I placed almost more of a priority on just suppressing units, and if I killed stuff, it was like a bonus. Because not being able to pick up that suppression at the end of the turn, even if you have Inspire in the list, which Bright 2 Village does, you don't have like unlimited Inspire. And if you're compelling stuff so that they can move forward, that's going to add up too. And I was able to accumulate a lot of suppression on the Ewoks, and there were a lot of times where like an Ewok skirmisher unit would have been able to charge me, but it just had suppression and it couldn't do 2 actions, right? Because they were out of range of 3PO or something. So because 3PO, compels only so far of a range, and 3PO has 3 health. So at some point, your Ewoks are going to be like too far forward for 3PO to be able to help them, unless you risk getting 3PO killed. So
yeah, if you pop them out too early, those 3 health diminish quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, and the Guardian thing is within range 1, so you can only fit like 1 Ewok unit in there to actually do the Guardian thing on him. Mm-hmm. So, and even if it were more, you're basically like cashing in Ewok wounds by shooting 3PO, because he doesn't have low profile or anything like that. So, yeah, it's I found that the list had a lot more firepower than I thought it did. I also faced the Black Sun list, and I know I was trashing Han's pistol before PAX. It is still mostly bad. It was ridiculous in that Black Sun matchup. I think he killed like 12 Black Sun by himself. Because every shot, like Black Sun have to be close range, so you're more likely to get them out of cover because they're basically at point blank range. And you're picking up like 2 models every time you shoot, which is 4 models a turn for Han. And you can basically like last first, you do Cassian crack shot, you wait until the latter part of the turn for Cassian to actually do the crack shot, hopefully after you've charged him up with aims from K2. So he's got like 5 aims. That's not right. 4 aims. Yeah, it's 4 aims. So that's often good to just pick up 4 models. Usually it's like 3, but sometimes it's 4. And then you go in last with Han with Steady. He picks up 2 to 4 models, and then you play Sorry About the Mess, and he picks up another 2 to 4 models. And in a very tight window, yeah, in a very tight window, that's like 2 whole units typically. So yeah. So the list has Pierce 10, which was super good in the Black Sun matchup. It was a little bit of like it was the Lila Claire style list. So it felt kind of good to like do well against a list like that when that's what bounced me from Worlds. But obviously I was playing something very different too. I was playing a Pierce stacking list with a ridiculous amount of Pierce in it. So that's a totally different matchup. But yeah, it had a lot more firepower than I thought. It was not enough against Yoda clones. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask about that, but don't. My apologies.
Yeah, so I played Mike. It was the last game on day 1, so it was round 4. We were both 3-0, so it was essentially like the first top 8 game, if you want to look at it that way. We drew the matchup. We were like, well, if we knew this was going to happen eventually if we both kept winning. Would have been nice if it was later, but round 4 is fine, I guess. So short version, I messed up my change of plans timing. I was not able to cancel Luminous with it. And the reckless diversion thing was helpful for like forcing target selection, but he was still able to kill significant things on that turn. He played Padme's 2 pips, so he kind of repositioned some stuff to like the opposite side of the line of sight blockers that I was using for reckless diversion, and he managed to fire support a vet squad off the table with the Cody in his E6 situation. So that wasn't great. And then because I wasted change of plans too early in the game, I was not able to cancel Luminous, and then he killed like 2 more units on that turn. That said, I still I killed the full arc unit on the first activation of turn 2, and that was before he had killed anything, so I felt pretty good about that. I was also somewhat reliably over the course of the game kind of dinking and dunking and picking up clones. And like near the end of the game, even though he had kind of those wombo turns, I still had a fair bit left, and his clones were starting to look kind of thin. There was a turn where it was a priority roll with I played Last Stand on Han. Han had like 4 wounds on him, and I had already played Sorry About the Mess, and he played Yoda's 2 pip. And if Han had been able to go that turn, I think I would have been able to like wipe 2 more clone units with him. But he won the priority roll, and then he killed Han with Force Wave, which I actually forgot was a thing temporarily. Yeah. Force Wave pretty good into Han because Han is low profile, but Force Wave obviously doesn't care about cover. So yeah,
Blast is strong.
Yeah, he double Force Waved him. The first Force Wave cleared all the dodges from Last Stand, and then the second one killed Han. So that wasn't great. But then even going to turn 6, I still had like some paths to victory. We were playing on KP, and I think we were actually tied on activations 5-5. Of course, one of his activations was Yoda. And he was able to, we actually switched KPs. I was able to take his home KP, but then he pushed Yoda to my home KP and took that. And then he was able to get the center KP. So he ended up winning 2-1. But he said it was his closest game that he had ever played running Yoda gunline in like 20. I think he said he was like 29-0 before that game.
Yeah.
And then of course he lost the next game to Sam. So then that became, I guess, by definition, his closest game. Yeah. But Yeah, it did better than I expected. It didn't do good enough. And I think if I had played Han's command cards in better order, which, maybe now that I've had some more practice with Han, I could do, it would have worked out differently. But yeah, I like it. It did a lot better than I expected it to. I don't know if I would say that Han is good, but he's definitely better than I thought he was.
I think he's pretty good against things that are commonly run at the moment. And even though the unit itself might be still on the weaker side, he plays well against what's popular.
Yeah, and his command cards are ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think he might have the best command hand besides Yoda in the game.
You could convince me of it.
I definitely think that's a conversation that could be had. So,
in terms of impact, he's definitely number 2.
Yeah, I mean his sorry about the mess obviously is just a straight priority win, but the other 2 are cards that like force your opponent to do something that they don't want to do or disrupt their whatever their game flow is, like, which there's not really, they're just very unique effects. So change of plans especially.
They remove your opponent's agency, and that's an incredibly powerful tool.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I like it. I might play it some more. We'll see. I don't know.
When's your next tournament?
I think that my next tournament is going to be Worlds. I
feel that pain.
Yeah, I signed up for LVO, like, whenever the signups went in, kind of as a hedge. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make that work. LVO is a great tournament. It's expensive and it's hard to get to from the East Coast anyway.
That's why I'm not going this year. It's just too much money.
Yeah, and it kind of sounds like a lot of the people that I typically travel with tournaments with, you, Mike, some of the other guys aren't going. So not that there's not going to be other great people there to hang out with. Right. There totally will be, but that's just another factor.
My usual crew of cost splitting roommates is not traveling, so it
right,
makes it a little bit more.
Right. So yeah, we'll see. It's a small possibility, but most likely my next tournament will be Worlds. So what I'm going to be doing in between now and then is going to just be Worlds practice.
That's fair.
And it's actually not a guarantee I can make it to that either, but I won't get into that now. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. It was fun. It was really fun to play Rebels again. Han Cassian is really fun. Full commandos are great. I would encourage all you Rebel players to try them. They were the clear standout for me. Full commandos combined with Chewie. I would never run them without Chewie.
No, they're too paper thin still, even after even after the cover mitigation.
Yeah. And when they lose even like 1 or 2 models, suddenly their dice pool just kind of sucks.
They're just like a slightly better sniper when they're down to 3 models.
Right.
And like barely better.
Right. It's, when they're down to 3 models, their dice pool is only 4 dice.
Yeah.
So, it's not good.
No, not in this list.
No. So I've tried to think about if I could find a way to fit a medic or something, because even with Protector, commandos still die, and it'd be really nice to have a way to keep them at full strength. So
that makes sense.
Maybe I've considered cutting the MK2 for 2 medics, because that's pretty close on points. And
you would just need another core.
Yes,
because the skirmisher doesn't count.
Right. I'd move the skirmisher to a Rebel Trooper probably, and just take improvised on Han.
That's fair.
And then I'd put one of the medics on the Rebel Trooper probably. But yeah, because MK2s, even after playing with an MK2 for 6 games, my opinion on them has not changed. They still suck.
They're especially horrible in a Gar meta because they're just free kill points.
Yeah, and the range 3, how do you get a cumbersome weapon to range 3 where it can actually do anything against a Republic list?
You pray it saves, or that you give them a better target.
Right. The short answer is you don't.
Yeah.
In my match with Mike, I'm like, I can't, there's nothing I can do with this. So just hung out in the back all game.
Yeah. It's your back capper.
Yeah. There was actually, it was really funny at the end of the game. I'm like, you know what? There's a weird thing that could happen here, because I had my MK2 and he had Yoda, and he had not gone with Yoda yet. And Yoda had 1 wound on him. Sorry, he had 4 wounds remaining. He had 1 wound token on him. I'm like, and Yoda was in heavy cover, so I would have needed 4 crits. I'm like, what if I just shoot my MK2, get 4 crits, and then you roll 4 blanks on Yoda? Like, that's a thing that could happen.
I've seen it happen before.
Yeah.
You know?
And he's like, all right, whatever, go for it. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna aim and shoot Yoda. Bam, 4 crits. And I'm like, did I just will this to happen? But then he only failed 1 save. So I was like, all right, well, almost.
The dream is dead.
The dream is dead. I got the 4 crits though. That was like the coolest thing the MK2 did all tournament. Most of the time it was useless. But
That's sad.
yeah. Anyway, all right. Any final thoughts?
No, I think I pretty much said my piece. Ties are dumb. Please give us an actual tiebreaker AMG.
Yeah.
Nick, thanks as always for a wonderful tournament. I don't think I mentioned this, so I do. Nick put on obviously the whole show,
Yep.
STO. Thanks to Dave for judging, and Nick provided as usual all 32 tables. So
Crazy.
as you said with the light cover, he's put a lot of work into them over the last
Yes.
6 months, kind of updating them to the new rules, trying to make them a little bit better for gameplay. And as someone who plays on them weekly, I think he's struck a nice balance lately. And these are by far my favorite balance tables of one of his tournaments I played on. So bravo. Please keep going. You've been amazing.
Yeah, in fact, this didn't really occur to me until about halfway through the tournament, but I think since the new cover rules were introduced, I think they've been least. I don't know what quite what the adjective is. They've been least bad in this tournament, and I think, like, I was actually able to get a handful of no cover shots in some of these games, and I think Nick's done a great job of kind of, making it so that the terrain pieces are more uniform shape, making it so that they're spread out more, reducing the amount of scatter, adding more area terrain, specifically area terrain that's like cover, stuff like that. I found that I was able to actually, like, the positioning was a little more meaningful than really any other tournament that I played in with the new cover rules, where it's just not meaningful at all.
Yeah.
As far as lateral positioning is concerned, anyway.
He's been working really hard to remove some of the jankier shape pieces, replace them with more cylindrical height too, so that we actually get that brought into play, and then cut out the scatter and, as you said, make more of light cover area instead of heavy cover. And I think he did really well for this event. It was a absolute blast table wise.
Yeah. So Nick, I definitely noticed. It wasn't like it wasn't obvious to me until partway through the tournament, but I'm like, hey, you know what? Like, this feels reasonably functional.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just got like a couple no cover shots. Like, what is happening? So
what is this feeling?
Yeah. I still don't like the new cover rules, and clearly Nick has done a lot of work to make them, like, reasonably functional with the tables. But yeah. All right. So yeah, great to see everybody. Great job running the tournament, Nick and company. I had a great time, and I got a real Philadelphia experience. So
I'm sorry.
it was it is what it is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Mike.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.